Good afternoon. My name is Ebony Love, and I'm in Jacksonville, Florida, and I'm sitting here via Zoom with Richard Garzola, who is the 55th, no, you are the 56th National Chair of the National Black Law Students Association. Richard is in Washington, D.C., and today is December 14th, 2022. It's a Wednesday. And so now that the introductions are out of the way, I'd like to start with a grounding question. Usually it's something fun, but I have a better one for you. My question is, what does being an organizer mean to you?
That's an excellent start to the interview. Being an organizer to me is being grounded, for lack of a better term, in your community and understanding the needs of your community, because more times than not, you're actually from it, and being deeply rooted in your community. So being an organizer is understanding how to allocate, find the resources that your community actually needs, and being the best point of contact for it, and someone who can be the best representative for their community. To me is an organizer, also someone who can coalition build, in those coalitions that are often forgotten in our communities as well, is the best way I would define an organizer.
What does community mean to you?
Community to me means the best way I like to think about it is kind of like a tree, and the community is that trunk. Like, we have a lot of different stems, a lot of different like sub communities, and those are those stems, and folks have their own ideologies. And if we use a Black community, we're not a monolith, but at the end of the day, we all go back to that center and core, and that's a community in regards to that trunk. So to me, it's, something we can always go back to, that we consider home, where a community is where what we make it. So for some, community can be the church. For others, community can be where folks gather together as a local organization, like their local NAACP or a BOSA in our circumstance. Like, your community will shift depending on where your feet are and where you're presently in. So it's more so a state of mind, but it's more so anywhere that there's a gathering of more than one, to me, in regards to folks who are similarly and like-minded or trying to achieve a common goal.
And in your answer, you mentioned finding a home. Where is home for you? Where are you born? Where did you grow up?
Physically, my home, I'm born and raised Miami, Florida, the best city in the world. And I love home, but also acknowledge, that we grew up around a lot of segregation, and a lot of zoning affected what home looks like. But for me, home is Miami, Florida. But now it's like, again, like a state of mind for me, if you ask what home is. But where I was born and raised is Miami, Florida.
So you mentioned segregation while you were in Miami. Growing up and going through, the K through 12 system, were you one of a few, or like, what did your classes look like?
Yeah, so that redlining actually affected how I went to school in regards to, so I grew up, I was an athlete as well. So it affected where I went to school. So I went to public school, K through probably 9, and then I transferred to a charter school, and I saw the vast differences in the education system there and where the funding was going as well. So being able to see that live and tangibly, like being able to feel the disparity, was enlightening for me at a young age. And I believe that when it comes to the class sizes, for example, like the public school felt like overpopulated, the charter school, it was like, oh, this is what just right feels like. So maybe like 20 folks per class, 25. And when I was in public school, it was like over 40, so it's just like, I can see the disparity there, attention to detail via the teachers as well. So those things like stuck out to me very quickly. Despite being an athlete, my focus was maybe not as much in academics. That was something I did notice in regards to the attention maybe teachers gave me as well.
What year did you graduate from high school?
2013.
Okay. So you said charter school, and as someone who studied the different kind of school systems, was your charter school a private school, or was it like, can you kind of explain what charter schools meant in Miami and the 2010 to 2013 kind of.
So at that time, you know, especially how they, at least how it was presented in marketing, if I take myself back to the mind of a 15-year-old, it was a private school it was a private school education that was publicly funded is the best way to define it, at least in the most watered down sense, particularly at that time. So you were able to go to the institution, no matter where you're aligned in regards to the district, hence the public funding. But the private part is like the actual academia and tangible and substantive part of the schooling. It mimics a private school, but it was funded publicly in regards to the support it received in regards to grants of the sort.
Were you bused to your charter school?
No, I wasn't bused. I usually either if my either my parents couldn't take me, I usually carpooled with somebody, because there was a couple of us that transferred for football reasons. So it was kind of like from that neck of the woods going over there.
Okay, and I asked this earlier, but I don't know. I'm going to be a little bit more explicit.
Got you.
When you transferred from public school, did you find that there were like the racial makeup was more marginalized communities in public school, and then when you went to the charter school, it was more you know, you're in a minority?
Yeah. I mean, in my public schools, a majority African American and Hispanic school, but like Hispanic, like dark, you know what I mean, like Afro Latino. There wasn't like white fair skinned folks. And when I went to the charter school, because of how the makeup of Miami is, there's not a lot of white people really, like Caucasian at least, identifying in Miami anyway. But it was like white passing Hispanic people. So like those who are from Cuban or Venezuelan descent, that was the majority makeup of the school. So it's like anyone who did not look like that, you assume they were an athlete, or weren't of that area. That was more affluent in Venezuelan, known as Doral, was what the area was. And so I saw that like switch like immediately, and you know, you kind of stood out. Like, okay, those are, you know, the black kids, right? Or the football players, right? So, or basketball. So that's kind of just what it was. And you know, we kind of just adjusted, but that's what it was for us. So I kind of saw that immediately.
And how do you identify?
I identify as Black. And then because of my Caribbean and West Indian descent, I obviously also identify because my parents are Panamanian and then also from Trinidad. So I also identify as Latino as well. But because of how we kind of grew up, we don't really identify with Hispanic as much, especially because of its connotation, but also because, you know, everywhere else outside of the United States, you know, it's not as broken down like demographically as much as it is here. It's very different. It's like you're Black or you're not. So how we grew up, you know, we just Black. I don't identify as African American, no, but I do identify as Black.
Are you a first generation American?
Yes, I am.
And now away from your demographics, how and when did you know you wanted to go to college?
Ooh. Honestly, I told you I was an athlete, so it's really just because of football. I'm not gonna lie. I didn't focus on. Being from Miami, it was either gonna be an athlete or a rapper, and I wasn't exposed to. And I talk about in like my diversity statements or personal statements. I wasn't really exposed to anyone in government, elected officials, organizers whatsoever. The only person that was remotely close to that was a parole officer. So for me, I only knew what I was exposed to. And, you know, college to me was, I wanted to play in a big stadium. You know, I wanted that exposure and that experience, not necessarily going to the league and making a lot of money. I only saw as far as what was right in front of me, which was high school and then going to college. I knew to go to college, I needed, you know, at least to graduate high school. So I would say I know I want to go to college only because of that.
And so where did you end up in college?
I went to Christian University in the middle of Florida, Lake Wales, Florida, small town. So it's called Warner. And it was an NAIA school. And I went there for 2 years. Then I transferred to Florida State University and played there as well. And that's where I graduated from.
What was your major?
My majors were sports management and women's studies at Florida State. And I graduated my associate's degree from Warner in business administration, marketing concentration.
How was it transferring from how would you describe the school in Middle Florida? Was it?
It was, I mean, it was less than 1,000 people. So it was
Yeah.
just like, it was a liberal arts college, but it was just like, there was no like we didn't know student organizations. Like when I didn't know anything like RSOs, so registered student organizations did not exist to me. Like all we knew was athletics class. That's it. We didn't have D9. We didn't have registered student organizations. None of that exists there. And it's very isolated. And because, you know, ironically, my path and trajectory, I was supposed to go to Bethune-Cookman and play there. And then the financial aid just didn't work out. And I jumped ship and went to Warner and played there. Full circle to go to Florida State. But at the time that the transfer, like it was, when I say it's night and day, it's because it felt like just the amount of kids who were in my major was the amount of folks who went to school with me at the first college. In just my year alone. So it's just like going from a school of less than 1,000 to a school of 48,000 was a big difference, to say the least.
Did anybody help you transition to FSU?
No, I was applying. I wanted a bigger stage and exposure to playing, but also my life. I mean, I had already had a lot of surgeries and injuries, so I knew I was at my wit's end. So what I was going to provide was very limited in my like athletic career that was left. But I knew no one knew I was going to transfer, not anyone there. And my family didn't really know either until I was accepted, because I was trying to leave maybe a semester before that. So I was applying to all of the local Florida universities and applying there. So I had gotten either rejected or didn't get the opportunity. The tape was iffy or my grade, but it really came down to that jump from the Warner to the larger Florida institutions in regards to the major, because I was already 2 years in. You know, I had to have a certain criteria, so I had to apply to different majors as well to see what school getting where I can fit in, essentially, is what I'm trying to say. And worked out with Florida State. So yeah, when I got in, of course, my family was ecstatic, and anyone else who found out, like, really didn't find out until I was already there and they saw a picture of me in a jersey, like in August or September. So it was different. Folks didn't know what was going on that summer with me, but it was a blessing. It changed my life.
Are you a first generation college grad?
Yes, because my mother had to go back to school. So technically she had her AA when she came here, but she went to school also back in her country, but in Panama, but they didn't count it here. So but she went back to school after I graduated as well. So kudos and congrats to her for that. My dad's trying to as well, but yeah, I'm a first gen.
Okay, and so now you're at FSU. Explain to me the atmosphere. Take me back to you stepping into FSU. And like you kind of mentioned earlier that at your previous school, there weren't student organizations. It was like a completely different atmosphere. So tell me about your FSU experience.
Yeah, it was an eye opener. I mean, it was an entire new world. Like I said earlier, it changed my life. Like I absolutely, the way folks speak about some institutions, I speak about Florida State. Maybe it would have been different if I went there as a freshman. I wouldn't see it the same way. But because I got that experience being somewhere, and not even speaking negatively about my first school, but it was just night and day of exposure. And it showed me at least how important resources were, because I don't know where my life would be if I didn't like leave that first institution. Maybe I would still be somewhere similar if I would have gone to UF or UM or something, but Florida State helped me with like the grind of networking and career ladder climbing and just everyday finesse as well. And just publicly speaking. I mean, there was things, I get messages now all the time from folks who see me on social media from my Warner days, and it's probably Facebook because I don't have anything else, but I'll just check and I'll see like they were like, you were so quiet back then, I barely knew of you, and now you're doing all these things. And I think to myself, like in high school too, all of that's because of like everything, the domino effect that Florida State had on me. My first year, I didn't really go out much. I was focused on football, my classes. I only had like one or two friends, and they kind of forced me to come out of my shell. And I didn't even have that in my previous school or in high school. I didn't have a lot of friends. I was always very focused on what's in front of me. My mom always said like a horse with blinders is what I am. So when I have a certain goal and a target, that's all I'm focused on. But they allowed me to broaden my horizons and look around. And I became more social. I joined organizations. And, I did more things throughout like that second year I was at Florida State. And then things kind of blew up after that.
How many years were you at Florida State?
I was there for 2.5 years.
And you mentioned that you had two friends who kind of brought you out of your shell. Who were those people?
Yes. My friend Jennifer, she's the one who pushed me to and inspired me to join the Black Student Union pageant, something I would have never done. And being where I'm from, it would probably have been frowned upon, but it definitely helped me come out of my shell. So I was Mr. 1968 after that. And it was pretty dope to participate in that. I didn't have a talent, so I had to teach myself how to play the harmonica. So I that was my talent during the pageant. I think I played a song with the harmonica. It was to feature Mask Off, I believe. So that made a little noise around campus because how Black folks be. So the whole crowd was just singing along and with the beat. So that was a moment. And soon after that, I was like vice president of another organization. I think it was Dream. And then I was on a bunch of e-boards at the time and, pledging all of that. So it was a lot going on, but that entire experience really changed my trajectory in life because I was more aligned in my purpose, I think is what Florida State helped me do and find it. It's something that was always there, which was my passion for advocacy and my passion for coalition building, and also maybe a natural knack I had for that I didn't know existed before.
Great segue. How did you know you wanted to go into law school?
So it is a great segue because around this time I am advocating for a multitude of things. I was more so upset that I guess notoriety wise, I was more infamous for what I did against the Legion of the South and other white supremacist groups. And that caught a lot of noise. And then I was kind of like the go-to person in Tallahassee. This is going on, call Richard. Protest needed, call Richard, like the rah-rah person at the front. Call Richard to organize it. So I was organizing protests for anything from the Dreamers to and assisting them in support, but also like legislative bills, voting rights for ex-felons, and then, obviously against the white supremacy groups that were trying to recruit on HBCU campus at FAMU. So it was a lot of stuff going on at the time. So folks pushed me to run for office. So it was around the time I was running for office, I knew I had to go to law school. So similar to why I was a women's studies major was because I didn't want to speak on women issues without being more educated on them, because I was very passionate about equal pay and people aren't talking about that enough. So it's something I always bring up, but I didn't feel it was appropriate to without educating myself. So the same goes for legislating and drafting bills and laws. I felt like at the time I was running for city commission, and that was always in the back of my mind, but it really clicked for me when I was canvassing, knocking on doors. It was 6 o'clock. I was in a very predominantly not only white neighborhood, but it was also Calern is very red, and I was not in familiar territory, and I was by myself. I had locks at the time, full disclosure, and that's only important for context because that's not something they're used to. So I had like flyers that didn't have my face or name on it, but my yard sign did. Now there's no yard signs of me in this neighborhood. So the sun is starting to go down. I've been there all day. It's hot, I'm tired. My car It's like an orange Challenger at the time with black rims, but it's parked way, way down the street. So I'm by myself. Essentially, police were rolling up, just following me around the neighborhood at this time. And it's like, I'm caught lacking because I don't have anything, like no form of identification on me, because there was no need at the time. It was just heavy and I was tired. So, I learned my lesson that day. They rolled up and asked me who I was, what I was doing in that neighborhood. And they're saying, well, we got a report. And I matched the description of someone who had robbed a local convenience store and held someone up at gunpoint. I'm like, well, I don't have a gun. And just because I'm a 5'10", 5'11" black male, like, I don't think I match the description just because of that, or that doesn't mean I do it. I have alibi. Like, I got all these people's doors I've been knocking on. I've been here since 10 in the morning. So whatever happened at 3 and it's 6, like, this is not me. I don't think I'd be around. And then they step out of the car asking me if they can search me. And in that moment, clicked like, wow, if I would have known my rights, if I would have been more educated, maybe the situation could go differently. That's all that's really going through my mind. Because I'm like, I know this feels wrong, but I don't know what to say. I wasn't fully equipped for that moment, for that situation. I wasn't prepared for that. And I promised myself I wouldn't get caught lacking again, because that situation could have gone a lot differently. Because me at the time, again, I was already known and I already felt like I was potentially targeted, because I felt like they knew who I was. I was sent ashes by a white supremacist group during my run for my political campaign to my home address. I don't know whose ashes it was. I don't know if it was a message or not. I don't know how intentional that was, but I had things like that were sent to me. I had death threats all the time. So the police targeted me, to me, it just connected as something else. So at that moment, as I'm reaching to see if I have anything, they grab my wrist, put my head on their windshield. And I'm like, okay, now this is really escalating. And as much as I advocate and love the Black community, and I may speak down, it was a white male who saved me, really, because he came out of his house. I had just knocked on his door maybe 10 minutes prior. He's like, what's going on out there? They're like, get back in the house, sir. He's like, what did he do? And like, for whatever reason, they disclosed that someone had robbed the local store, and he told me, get back in the house. Like, I might be dangerous. He's like, there's no way he could have a gun and rob the store. Like, I've seen him walk up and down the street. I patrol my neighborhood all day. And they're like, he's this guy. He walks out with something with my face on it. And if it wasn't for that, because I'm just like, I told you I was a political candidate. And at that moment, I was just like, I was glad to be alive. I was done. I just walked to my car, didn't tell nobody this happened. Didn't write about it, didn't mention it to nobody for like 3 years, until I wrote it in my law school personal statement.
What year did you run for candidacy?
It was 2018. So I was like, I was pretty young, but yeah, it was 2018.
And so, like, putting this into context, Trayvon Martin was 2012.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 2012, and that happened in Sanford, Florida.
Right.
When that was happening to you, were you thinking about, Trayvon? Were you thinking about anybody else?
I was thinking about Jordan Davis. Jordan Davis was 2012 as well. He was in Jacksonville, Florida. I was there at the same time. He had the same skin complexion. Obviously, his mother now is a congresswoman, but in Georgia. But at the time, I was actually there that same night in Jacksonville when Jordan was shot for a white man, shot into the vehicle for playing music too loud. And that's something, whatever you determine too loud is, most other folks would, for a lot of folks who drive that are teens. And we were both 17, so we're the same age. So that's what came to mind for me in that moment, 6 years later. So, just thinking about him, thinking about so many others, but particularly Jordan, because that one always stuck with me, because it literally was like, not this could be your brother, your sister. No, it could have been me. Like, if I went to the wrong gas station that night, that would have been me, because I played music the same way he did. My friends did too. So That's what came to mind in that moment. And that's why in that moment I decided, okay, I need to educate myself. I need to start thinking more seriously about going to law school and equipping myself with the tools to be more prepared for another moment like this, not only for myself, but for others, and make sure this doesn't happen anymore.
Did you have any mentors who kind of guided you either through undergrad or through the law school application process?
Absolutely. During for undergrad and career opportunities and just life, definitely some of my pro fights for sure. Before they were my pro fights, but then also just in general in the political space, but also in the law. Sean Pittman for sure has always been a mentor to me. He's an attorney in Tallahassee. He focuses a lot on government affairs, so that's where that intersection was, where he kind of helped on both sides and supported me after in my endeavors as well, and still does to this day. So he's one who sticks out, who has been around for a long time. And Ben Crump assisted a lot as well during my time going to law school and my process there, because he's also an alum of my university. And then when I think of just life in undergrad in general, I had a lot of support from my peers. I didn't know a lot of things. I was wet behind the ears because I came from Warner, came from a small school. I didn't know about RSOs and other things that you're supposed to naturally just do, how to operate and move in the space. So my peers, it's just that sense of community. I think 8% of Florida State, at least when I was there, was Black. And it just felt so large to me. It felt like family, felt like home. That's why everything I do, I try to create a family environment for those, because that's what was cultivated for me when I arrived at that nest there at Florida State, which I love so dearly, and still keep those connections now when folks go back for homecoming, things like that. So for me, it was my peers during that time, but also like mentors. For law school, I don't think I had like a key person. I just had I'm very big on reaching back. I'm very big on being proactive. So no one really came and helped me. I just asked. I had particular questions for particular people. I knew who to contact. So a lot of folks reviewed my personal statement and they changed like 80 times. One of your predecessors, Charlene, she helped me out a lot in that process when I was navigating moving to DC, navigating law school as well. So that's someone. Also, one of my predecessors, the vice chair, Jamal Sola, he also helped out a lot during that time and process with law school. So, keeping it in the family.
And for the ether, for the people who are listening or watching this interview in the future, a lot of acronyms have been used, like ProFight or D9, things like that. And if you want definitions, you should go and watch Charlene Stanberry's interview, because she defines all of these things. But anyway, going into you getting into law school, where did you start? Tell me about that process.
Where do I start my process? Okay. So for myself, after my courses, after I took the LSAT like 2 times, I felt like it was time. This is pre-pandemic, so fall 19 is around the time that I was preparing to go. I was in my LSAT, my first year law school cycle, and I knew I was targeting schools in the DMV area, Florida, and Texas, and I just wanted to go to law school, but I want to go to somewhere that fit. I know my dream law school at the time was probably like Howard Law, Georgetown, and I was looking at Miami as well to go back home. But I had like 2 cycles in one in that moment, because when my personal statement changed and the pandemic happened, I missed out I was supposed to sit in on some classes. I was supposed to visit and tour schools, and that didn't happen. And when it didn't happen, some of those schools I got waitlisted at where I thought I would have gotten in if they would have met me in person like they were supposed to. And that changed a lot of things. And FAMU gave me an opportunity. FAMU, I believe, was one of the first, I think the first law school to accept me was NCCU Law, FAMU, and TMSL. And the first one to reject me was actually Georgetown and FIU. And that always stuck with me. And if a family gave me the best scholarship package at the time, I thought, particularly with the pandemic, I had LB Line Brothers who stayed in Orlando, and then at the time I came back from the pandemic and lived in Florida. So affordability wise, it made sense. University of Florida waitlisted me and gave me a guaranteed transfer offer. So, I kind of held out in Florida to see if they would call me like week 2 or week 3 of classes. They never did. But it wasn't contingent on grades. They just said after your year, wherever you go, you can come. But after they didn't take me the first time, I didn't really want to go because I felt like I was A1 ready. I told them I'm gonna kill it. And I did. I had a 3.95 GPA after my first semester. And I told them, and I'm like, you made a mistake and you missed out. And that was that with UF, because I told them this is why you miss out on Black talent all the time. But again, I always will speak positively because I did that with every school. And I funnel them talent and folks all the time now, just so I don't repeat the same mistake it did with me. So that was my process. But also the pandemic, it was a virtual law school time. So we are the pandemic kids. So class of 23, we didn't really experience in-person law school really till halfway through law school or 2 a year. And I had some classes in person that spring of 1L, but they were all optional. Like if you wanted to come in person, but they were like hybrid classes. And it was a decent experience in Orlando. I just had my battles with administration, and we were at odds about a lot of things on what the best way to allocate resources. And it's been documented from time to time with pre-law students as well that ask the dean about it because they know of me and how strong I advocate for our HBCU law schools. But it came down to the career opportunity office because, I wasn't even done with my first semester. I already had my internship with Apple, I had my internship with the NAACP, I had, looking at all these big law opportunities and things like that no one was getting. I had to find and seek everything on my own. And then plus that, I'm not getting paid for the labor I'm doing for seeking those and funneling it to my classmates. There's no reason one else should have to be doing all of that while managing the workload of school. There's people who are getting paid to do this. So I sat down with the dean. I even brought in a meeting. I sat down with a classmate who had transferred already, decided to, and was accepted into a T14 school. So my dean can hear from someone who's leaving and myself at the time who was still staying to see what we can do to expand and provide opportunities. Why the curve is the way it is. We were asking the hard questions. Like there's no reason there's only 1 or 2, 3 A's to go around and we're on a C or C- curve. So we were asking the hard questions, and we're like, when pre-law students talk to us and ask us about this, we have to tell them what they're getting into at all of our institutions that are similar to this. It just hurts the most when it's institutions that are led by our own. And that's the part that hurt the most, because it sounds like we're talking down on the schools we're actually uplifting. The issue is we're trying to give you a holistic approach, and there's no way we can omit you're going into a school that may not give you the opportunities you're seeking post-grad. You have to do it and get it on your own. Not only the resources, but also, the academic portion. It was a completely different experience, me as a 1L versus some of my current classmates as 1Ls, when you're facing a C or C- curve and a closed book test versus someone who had a B or B+ curve. Like it's just way different type of pressure that you're facing in regards to your rankings and things like that. So after that time, August, I had gone through another transfer cycle, so another law school cycle. And I was looking at, I wanted, to a detriment, I was obsessed with wanting to prove that we can succeed on the biggest stage, and people from where I come from could, and we didn't have to fit a certain mold or kind of Black person, that we can speak the way we speak, hang out and dress the way we hang out, and still succeed academically. Like I wanted to kick somebody's ass in the classroom at Yale Law and Harvard and at a big law firm or wherever, but also do the things I do in my spare time and prove to folks like you don't have to be one kind of lawyer or law student. So during that cycle, that was my approach. I was hell-bent on being the best I can be, but also beating what they assumed was the best in regards to my white colleagues and peers. So I developed great relationships with deans across all the top 10 law schools. But ultimately, I had committed to staying until my disagreements with my dean And like the weekend before the first week of school of my 2 year, I just called whoever of those schools that accepted me that would still take me, and that was Georgetown. And here I am.
And now I'm going to pivot a little bit in the time that we have left. Um, how did you learn about Nabalsa and how did you get your foot in the door with it?
Yeah, I mean, y'all are looking right at her. I mean, of course, shout out to one of my own predecessors that connected me with Ebony. So Anthony, our 54th chair, connected me with Ebony at the time. Obviously, like I was at FAMU, I was part of the Southern region, the sophisticated Southern region. And I wanted an opportunity to serve and help. As I mentioned, I was having a strong semester, so I felt like I don't always, especially in my current role, I don't always advocate and push for 1Ls to serve in leadership so soon. So that's my disclaimer. You have to be I hate to say a certain kind, but you just got to be built a little different to do the things that a 1L, like your first semester in law school, and juggle anything. It's really to get your feet wet and understand even what's going on, because there's so many things being thrown at you. But if you are built different or you can handle it, which I think a lot of folks can be, but it's a certain kind of 1L. I was fortunate to interview and be appointed as the mock trial director. And from there, under Ebony's leadership, I was able to, excel in that role, be attentive, learn the structure of how a region operates with a chapter, and also learn a bit about what was going on nationally, fundraising, operations of our association, and meet other people. And Serbosa 50 was really a family. That was the 50th board of the Southern region. And when it came time for elections and our regional convention and national convention, I realized under the guise of Ebony and advice, like maybe I should take a look at, stepping into a national board role, and that might suit me best, and to explore it. And I did, and I made the decision and committed to run for a member at large seat. And yeah, the rest is kind of history. But then I became a national board member spring of my 1L year.
And just kind of like level setting and just providing my background. This isn't my interview. I'm just giving a background because I haven't said this before, but you entered law school fall 2019, right?
Fall 2020.
Fall 2020. Yes, fall 2020. Okay, first of all, the pandemic like really screwed up everybody's brains. But anyway, fall 2020. And so we're in the middle of the pandemic, and everything that we did as a regional and for the most part for a national board was online, because we didn't have vaccines yet. Vaccines didn't come out until December 2020, whatever. It was easier to make these connections amongst us because we were online. Whereas for me, I did go to the national convention in Cincinnati, Ohio, and literally the day after we got back, the pandemic shut everything down. And so that was like a little bit of a different transition for the national from my perspective. But knowing that and knowing like what 1L of any law school is, I think that we really tried to make sure that in the fall, like during your finals or like during that kind of study period, we were not putting a lot of responsibility or anything like that on y'all. But I also realized that we had a very old board. So we had a lot of 3Ls, and there was not going to be anybody who kind of saw this. And so I think I was very intentional in trying to get a 1L who could handle that kind of responsibility. And that's why I took, his name is Anthony Collier's advice at the time. He was a Southwest regional chair. I took his advice to bring you on board because I stalked people. So I stalked you. I saw what your pedigree was. And I said, you know what, let's bring him on. So that's from my perspective, only because you invoked it. But you're national member at large. Do you want to like talk about your experience on the national board? Like, how has it been? Do you have any goals that you wanted to accomplish either as member at large or as national chair? Like, tell me about your national experience.
Yeah, it's been phenomenal. I always talk about how Nabalsa is a family. It's not always the most functional one at times. It's not always one that gets along, but what family does, especially a Black one. So I often like to mention Nabalsa, or Founder Cooper will remind us too, is one of the oldest historic Black organizations that exists to this day. Outside of the D9 and maybe NCNW and the NAACP and Urban League, we're the oldest and most historic Black organization. And being that, what that is it brings a lot of things we can look back to and a lot of things we can look forward to. And we're still needed as much today as before. So I took the prestigious organization seriously and my job seriously. Oftentimes we have folks who may take it too serious or not serious enough. I mean, in my experience, at least throughout our organization, especially because of the pandemic, sometimes as a community, we may have felt more on the side of not as serious. And folks forget and I'm mentioning seriousness only because of the fact that we are a nonprofit corporation. So at the national level, the mindset is a lot different from the chapter level or the regional level at times as well. So I'm very business oriented. So whoever is in leadership at the national level, but particularly the CFO, CEO, and COO, which is the national chair, national treasurer, national vice chair, they have to take into account that the brand and the association and corporation that is NABOSA, everything we do is in its best interest and we're furthering the mission. And sometimes that doesn't always align what the members want, actually. So it's not really that we need to do what the members always want or need. It's really NABOSA first. And many times that aligns with the members, but there's those few times where it doesn't. And that's where I learned that in these 2 years serving on national boards. I think my experience as a 1L being on a regional board I'm very grateful for that because it helped me see things from the view of a not only regional officer, but someone more close to the ground in like chapters and the regional level, where I wasn't just someone who came in on the national board and only saw things from that level. So I'm able to see things in all 3 categories, especially in decision making today. As far as initiatives and goals, my board knows me as a very big visionary. I came in, I probably, but then over the year, and anyone who has visions, you add to them. Like I had internally, I circulated with my national board my first week, 56 on 56. I had 56 goals, really, but I only share with the public the big 3, which I've accomplished already. And one is about to be launched in a month, which is a national mentor program. But things like the exposure piece, like the Watch Your Yard partnership, things regarding another amicus brief occurred now, the Supreme Court SFFA versus Harvard case, things such as the mentor programs on a small level with, bringing intellectual property or bringing back the scholarship guide, and providing those opportunities. And then things with HBCU, the HBCU law pipeline was another one of the big 3 that launched off in its different phases, using the Watch Your Yard partnership, using scholarships. And now, I guess by the time someone sees this, the HBCU law job fair, where we'll provide particular employers or allocate them the pipeline to HBCU law students at those 6 schools, where they didn't get where they're getting opportunity like no other, in partnership with one of our sponsors and partners to be decided or announced. So when someone sees this, they'll probably know which one I'm talking about. But always working. So I've been a big, people like to say in the history of NABOSA, every chair kind of identifies. You have like a chair that's very big on advocacy, programming, business. And I try to be a master of none, but a jack of all trades, to touch a little bit of everything. I want folks to look back and say during, this term, NABOSA did a little bit of everything. I like to think we did. We weren't perfect, but I learned a lot about myself throughout this time that was challenging. But I think we've, particularly speak back maybe to some of our founders and first chairs and those leaders and folks who just served in chapters as well back then, to when they knew NABOSA in the 70s and late 60s to now. The goal was to bring us back to, not only elevate us to new heights, but also bring us back to a level of where we're running efficiently and we're respecting. I think that's a level we're at, but I also am not complacent. Me and founder Cooper share the same goal of wanting to strike fear in law schools' hearts when they think about NABOSA, for lack of better terms. So if NABOSA sends you something, you're worried and concerned, you take it seriously because it's a priority. And I feel like that was lost within the last 10 years. So I took it upon myself. So like personally pen so many letters directly to deans. Obviously we have our general and large one from the organization that went out for support, but many times when an individual matter happens. So when we talk about my experience as a member at large or as a vice chair as well, last term, I came up with the idea for the incident report form. So that was one of my babies as a vice chair, and it's been used this year often. So I'm grateful that it's been continued to actually use at the chapter level when folks experience discrimination or injustice on their campus via their administration or another organization. When they cannot use that the grievance policy, they are able to use an incident report form and see what ways we can help. Because my goal and dream is to help the overall Black law student experience, not just the corporate governance and organization of NABOSA, but also the shaping that Black law student experience. So hence why the theme for the year, a lot of people are seeing like our convention theme. Day one, the convention theme for me was easy. I wouldn't be here without Black women. NABOSA wouldn't either. The best leaders in NABOSA have always been women. So it's the year of the Black woman. That's a convention theme. But the theme for the board and the year for NABOSA was enhancing the vision. When we think about the vision, it's Founder Cooper's vision and dream for NABOSA. And to me, that was a no-brainer.
In our remaining time, I'm going to spitball at you, and you're going to hate me for this. Off the top of your head, give me all the past years that you can name, starting with you, going backwards.
Okay. So Richard Garzola, Simone Yap, Anthony Collier, Rachel Barnes, Brandon Cahey. Actually, I skipped Andrea Dargan, Brandon Cahey, Mark is this damn Dunham, Derek Daly, damn, that's my dog too. Shoot. Damn, so her name starts with a C. Damn, Jamal's chair. What's Jamal's chair's name? Okay, I'm gonna put. I have to go in order. He's gonna kill me. And then, damn, where is Victoria? No, Victoria's before him. So there's Victoria, Kendra.
Victoria's last name.
And this is a good one. I hope they don't see this. This is not. I called all of them at least at one point. Yeah, I'm losing Victoria's last name, and then obviously Kendra Brown and Melinda Hightower. What's his name after Victoria? It's crazy. I could tell you everything about him, but his name.
What school did he go to?
University of Baltimore. And
for law school. Yeah,
and he actually just ran for and won a Democratic nomination for Maryland delegate too. His name starts with a C. I don't know why I'm missing his name, but yeah, that's like the last 11 or 12 chairs, I think. Actually, probably keep going before. What I end up at? Melinda.
I think you said Melinda Hightower.
Yeah, Melinda Hightower, Ed Cohen twice. By that point, Rakia Pippins, that's 2007. Oof. Chris was 2004. I'm missing someone in between there.
Chris who?
He went to Florida State Law School. No, never mind. That's not Florida State. He went to UF. Christopher, that was 2004. Dang. He ran off the floor at convention to be chair because Joe Briggs from Florida State Law was his treasurer. My memory's folding on me today, but.
Oh, I'm about to test it again. Are you ready for the next question? Who are the founders of NABOSA?
Well, Aldrin J. Cooper Jr. Founded NABOSA in December 1968, but the actual inception of the idea was in Notre Dame, University of Notre Dame, with his friend and I believe, was it his brother? Years before that. But I guess someone else who would be considered one would be Jay Otis, And it depends who you ask with this question, I guess. But some would say, our first three chairs, they would say. So Jay Cooper, Jay Otis, and they would say, some people use Arthur Martin as well, but I don't think so. Like, he wouldn't say that. So I wouldn't say if he doesn't.
That's it for my rapid fire questions. So we started this conversation with talking about what an organizer means to you. And you kind of talked about, it means being grounded in your community and like coalition building and doing all these things. And I think during your interview, you've kind of talked about how you personally do all of these things without actually naming yourself as an organizer. But you've also said that Nabalsa is family. And so when you think about an organizer and you think about somebody who like is grounded in the community and does things on behalf of their community, would you also say that, being an organizer really is trying to bring in that familial aspect, or how do you tie like the community into being a family? How would you connect all of that together?
Yeah. Well, actually, before, I know someone was going to see it, so I didn't forget about rest in peace Bob Pickett in the last question, but or Buns in the national chairs. I definitely skipped Chibundu, but that's my guy. But yeah, to answer your question, it's tied into family. I think a lot of the questions you asked, so being an organizer is tied into family and community. I think at a time I was considered a very big organizer because of things I was doing in undergrad. But now that you phrase the question that way, a lot of the things we do today, a lot of things Nabosa does is organizing. Nabosa is family to me because I can, and not because I'm chair. Like, this is before I was chair. I was saying this long before, while I was a 1L, and before that, I mentioned folks I met or helped me in my process through and to law school and during and will after, that were former Nabosa officers or just were part of or members of the organization, like Jamar and Charlene and others. But also when I first got in with yourself. And to me, I understand like there are certain people that I can just call, and anything I need, they may be there for me, or they can connect me and be a resource or whatever I need. And it may not be professionally, it may be just with life, with being a Black person in law, or it just may be something like I want to reference, not for myself, but for a mentee or someone else coming up. Like, you helped me, let me help them again, and vice versa. I do the same. Or just someone needs a shirt off, someone needs something, like they would give me the shirt off their back, or vice versa. And that's already happened before. I can be in any city in the country, and now it's just like Nabosa's there. Like, that's what I mean by family. I remember, I can give an example. I think it was St. Louis last year. It was snowed in. They have no way to get the hotel for the regional convention for the Midwest. I think I was vice chair at the time, but there was no way. Like, the airport was snowed in. Like, the news was there asking folks questions about how they were going to get home. Like, that's how bad it was. And I just assumed, like, okay, I'm stuck. I'm gonna miss like first half of this convention, and it is what it is. And I just text Simone, the chair at the time, and I'm just like, yeah, you're going to have to hold it down yourself. And she's like, dang, like, no, there's no way. Like, you're not just gonna sleep at the airport. And then I was like, I mean, I can like let someone know from one of the other chapters maybe and see what they can do. But I'm like, I don't know what they can do if they can change the weather. And they literally, two folks from Iowa and one from Texas, actually, chapters, rented a car, drove in that snow, in those icy roads that were shut down, picked me up from the airport and brought me to the convention. And two of them, Avery and Cassandra, are actually on my current national board as members at large. So it goes to show, what folks can and will do for family.
Good stopping point. So thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure and an honor to be sitting with you and answering these questions.